Hello students, today we are pursuing our national income. Yesterday we had done income method. Now is a turn of expenditure method. If we talk about national income is NNP at FC. NNP at FC. Now if we have to find out the expenditure, if we have to continue with the expenditure method, then we need to find GDP at MP. Students, what we have done with the production method, what we will be finding? We would be finding GDP at MP. With the income method, we had find NDP at FC. Again, when we talk about expenditure method, we are going to get GDP at MP. This is a very important point that you have to keep in mind, that national income is NNP at FC with production method or value added method, which we are saying, and expenditure method. We are going to get GDP at MP. Dear students, have your books and copies open so that you could be writing along with me. And it's only the income method where we are going to get NDP at FC. Now, let me first write the components of expenditure method. What items we are going to take in the expenditure method. First is private final consumption expenditure, termed as C. If we talk about private final consumption expenditure, it is the consumption expenditure done by the households and non-profit institutions on their private consumptions, like we are consuming food. It is an expenditure done either on the consumption of services, durable goods as well as non-durable goods. If as a household we are doing the consumption expenditure, it is under the private final consumption expenditure. If some non-profit organization is doing, suppose we are saying like these days, the Gurdwaras and other non-profit organizations are preparing langars for the poor people, it falls in the category of private final consumption expenditure. Any expenditure done for the consumption of durable, non-durable or services by households or NGOs, then it comes under private final consumption expenditure. After private final consumption expenditure, we are having government final consumption expenditure. It's termed as G. Now let me make it clear what government final consumption expenditure it is. Government final consumption expenditure means the final consumption expenditure done by the government on purchase of food for the defense personnel, for purchase of uniforms for the defense personnel, for purchase of midday meals. That expenditure, which is not the investment expenditure by the government, which should be the consumption expenditure either made on midday meals or on the defense personnel. Consumption of food or consumption of uniforms. That is government final consumption expenditure. After this, we are having a very important component which is termed as investment expenditure. Investment expenditure. Now dear students, it's I. Here, investment expenditure is a point that need a thorough elaboration. What do you find in the questions is gross domestic capital formation. Gross domestic capital formation. If we say investment expenditure is the expenditure done by we are having three type of persons. One is households doing investment expenditure. Where the households are doing investment expenditure? They are doing the investment expenditures on the construction of houses they are living in. That is the investment expenditure done by the households. They are constructing their houses. Secondly, by the producers. Where the producers are doing investment expenditure? You are quite clear with it. Land and building, plant and machinery, premises, all such expenditure are done by the producers in the form of investment. Thirdly, the government is also doing investment expenditure to build the infrastructure of the country, roads, bridges and all such. So three type of sectors are doing investment expenditure: household sector, producer sector, government sector. What the investment expenditure is termed as, mostly instead of investment expenditure, you would be finding in the question gross domestic capital formation. Now, investment expenditure or gross domestic capital formation. Capital formation, addition of capital during 1 year. It has further two components. Gross domestic fixed capital formation. Fixed capital formation and change in inventory, which is closing stock minus opening stock. Now, investment has two components. We have already done that investment is having two components: fixed investment and inventory investment. Fixed investment and inventory investment. If we talk about fixed investment, that could be given in the form of gross domestic fixed capital formation. And the second is change in inventory, that is closing stock minus opening stock. Now, what you are required to pay attention to is, if gross domestic capital formation is given and change in inventory is given, you are not supposed to take change in inventory. Only the heading need to be taken into account, not the subheading. Each and every time I am telling you that only the heading are the part of the questions, not the subheading. But if in the question gross domestic fixed capital formation is given as well as closing and opening stock is given, then you have to add both to get the investment expenditure. Clear, students? Now, one more concept regarding this point only. If, suppose, in place of gross domestic capital formation, it is given net domestic capital formation. In place of gross domestic capital formation, it is given net domestic capital formation. Then what will happen? We are going to find GDP and MP with the expenditure method. If here word net domestic capital formation is given, our answer would come as NDP at MP, not GDP at MP. Here, this thing is clear. If instead of gross domestic capital formation, you are given net domestic capital formation, then instead of getting GDP at MP, you would be getting NDP at MP. So this point should be noted very clearly, that if in place of gross we have given net, so in place of gross domestic production we would be getting net domestic production. Don't try to change it gross into the net. We would be getting the answer as net, then we would be further making changes. So hope so investment expenditure is very clear to you. Our last item is net exports. If we talk about net exports, Net exports is the difference between exports and imports. Whatsoever we are exporting, we are getting foreign exchange. In return, whenever we are importing, we have to pay the foreign exchange, and the difference between the export and import is termed as net export. If you are given net export as well as import, always remember that you have to take the heading only, not the subheading. So, net export is equal to export minus import. Now, how the further question will proceed? We are going to get GDP at MP by adding all the four components. GDP at MP by private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, investment expenditure and net exports. But if instead of net export, in the question it is given net imports. Net imports means the imports are more than exports. Imports are more than exports, then this fourth item will become negative item. Then this fourth item, instead of adding net export, we would be subtracting net imports. Write it clearly. Instead of adding net exports, we would be subtracting net imports. Fine. So, here we are going to get GDP at MP. If in the question we are asked to find NNP at FC, or we are asked to find the national income. So, how we would be finding? We are already on GDP at MP. Now, from G, gross to net, we have to subtract the depreciation. Depreciation is also called cost of fixed capital. Cost of fixed capital or consumption of fixed capital. It is termed as consumption of fixed capital. Now from domestic to national, we have to add NFIE, net factor income from abroad. But if in the question it is given net factor income to abroad, you have to subtract. You have to remember only the treatment of net factor income from abroad. If in the question it is given factor income to abroad, you have to just reciprocal the sign whatsoever you are doing. Now from MP to FC, market price, we are having direct taxes, so we would be subtracting the indirect taxes and adding subsidies. In this way, you would be getting NDP at FC. So dear students, once again I would be repeating it for you, that expenditure method we would be getting GDP at MP. First component is private final consumption expenditure done by the households and NGOs. Government final consumption expenditure done by the government on midday meals or defense. Investment expenditure done by households, producers and government. Always written in the question in the form of gross domestic capital formation, having two components, gross domestic fixed capital formation and change in inventory. If the word net domestic fixed capital formation is given, then what will happen? Instead of finding GDP at MP, we would be finding NDP at MP. Inventory investment we have to add on. Fourth item is net exports. Export minus import. It's a positive item. We have to add. But if net imports are given, then it would become the negative item to be subtracted from the national income. So, after finding GDP at MP, you could be easily finding, you could be firstly writing down the formula for finding NNP at FC or national income, then you would be finding the national income. Hello students, now we would be solving one numerical question of expenditure method. With expenditure method, what we are going to get? GDP at MP. By adding private consumption expenditure plus government final consumption expenditure plus investment plus net exports. So these four items, if we add, we will be getting GDP at MP. Now students, look what do we have in the question. You can pause the video and write down the question. Now, do we have net exports? No, we do not have net exports. In place of net exports, we are having net imports. Then what we would be doing? Minus net imports. If it were net exports, then we would be adding it, but if it are net imports, we would be subtracting it. Now, minus 10. Now, in the question, what they are asking, find gross domestic capital formation. Now, they are not asking the national income. What they are asking? Gross domestic capital formation. Capital formation. In the question, now be very careful. In the question, it is asked, find gross domestic capital formation. Now, we know consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation it is I, plus net export. If not net export, net imports are there, we would be subtracting. Now, what another item? National income we are having. Keep it here, I will tell you what you have to do with national income. Private final consumption expenditure. We do have private final consumption expenditure. Here we need to put consumption expenditure. Consumption of fixed capital. What I have told consumption of fixed capital is? It is depreciation. Consumption of fixed capital. How much capital is consumed during the year? Factor income from abroad. Keep it here. Government final consumption expenditure. We have 200. This is what we need to find, and this is not. We are not having. So, how two items that we are not having, we are going to find out. I know that you are very good in mathematics. If one item is not given, you are easily going to find it out. But if two items are not given, then how we are going to do it? Dear students, here comes the role of national income. We are given national income. National income is NNP at FC. We can find GDP at MP with it. If the national income is given, NNP at FC is given to us. We are in requirement of GDP at MP. Let's try to find GDP at MP from NNP at FC. Let's try the formula. If we have to go from net to gross, we have to add depreciation. If we have to go from national to domestic, we have to add or less. If we have to go from national to domestic, we have to subtract NFI. And if we have to go from factor, cost to market price, we have to add net indirect taxes. So, is this clear? What GDP at MP, we are in requirement. If we get GDP at MP, we are easily going to find gross domestic capital formation or I component. Now in the question, one more information is given to you, that is NNP at FC. With NNP at FC, we are required to find GDP at MP. Now, net to gross. It means in the net we are not having depreciation, we would be adding the depreciation here, and national income is 770. Depreciation, I have already told you, consumption of fixed capital 60. NFIA. Now students, here again the question is having a one trick for you. It is factor income from abroad and it is net factor income to abroad. We always need to take net factor income either from abroad or to abroad. We are not supposed to take only factor income from abroad. We have to take net factor income from abroad or net factor income to abroad. Here is the question, net factor income 2 abroad we are having. So instead of subtracting, we would be adding net factor income to abroad. How much it is? 20. Not taking factor income. After that, net indirect taxes. Here we are having net indirect taxes. Comes out to be 70. So 0, 7, 2, 9, 15, 15 and 7, 22. 2 carry, 7 and 2, 9, 20. So that is your GDP at MP. Dear students, we never take any current transfer. We never take any current transfer. Current transfers are one-sided payments which are not a part of national income. Unilateral or one-sided payments. We had done transfer payments. Now, GDP at MP is 920. Now, is it possible for you to find the gross domestic capital formation? Hope so. Yes. So 920 is equal to, here minus minus will become plus, 800, 810 plus I, keep I here, 920 minus 810 equal to 110. That would be your gross domestic capital formation. Clear, student? How we have to find it? Firstly, what we had done, we had written the formula in the question. If it was asked find national income, so you are going to get the GDP at MP and then put it to find the national income. But here in the question, one component is missing. If one component is missing, there must be certain way to find out GDP at MP. You are given national income. With the national income, find GDP at MP. Put the values right over here and find the missing component.